Greetings from Mel.
Greetings from Sym.
It is our pleasure to have you with us for another B.O.O.K Podcast moment. B.O.K, our book, also known as Building Our Own Knowledge, is a co-created cloud for interrogating, finding, making, and sharing experiences and knowledge on our own terms.
This podcast is brought to you by the labour of love of B.O.O.K working group members Sym Mendez and Melissandre varin. The music carrying us through is by B.O.O.K working group member and commissioned artist Sym Mendez. Sym brought their sonic waves to its final form by reading All About Love, New Visions by Bell Hooks. We thank our loving ancestors for using our beings as vessels.
We hope you whine or wave with this DIY podcast as much as we do.
Welcome back. This is the B.O.O.K Podcast, B.O.O.K, aka Building Our Own Knowledge. Sym here. I am B.O.O.K's artist liaison, podcast producer, and facilitator. I'm here with Mel, B.O.O.K's artist curation artist. Curated artist.
Anyway, no.
Yes, and we are here with Adelaide Bannerman. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So maybe before we begin, we can just take some moments. I think it's been like a full morning. It's currently 11:04, but it kind of feels like mid-afternoon for some reason. I don't know. Yeah, so maybe we just take some breaths, like take a moment, do some ins and outs. I'm gonna like hold my hand to my chest and feel my chest raise and lower as I breathe. I'm just like grounding back into reality.
We'll do that all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah. I certainly need more of those moments. Yeah.
Taking a moment every time. Maybe I'll just do that literally before every meeting. So yeah, I can do some intros. Maybe we can start with you, Adelaide. So if you don't mind telling us who you are, and maybe your star sign and what you care about.
Yeah. Well,
no pressure.
I'm Adelaide Bannerman. I'm a curator. I'm also curatorial director at Tiwani Contemporary, which is a commercial gallery focused on contemporary arts and artists living on the continent of Africa and African diaspora. I'm a Leo. I don't believe I'm a typical Leo, but I understand some of the qualities of that and recognize some of those, some of the good points and the bad points. So I aim to be a good and, boundless kind of Leo as well. Hopefully not too bossy. What do I care about? Was that the next question? I care about feeling grounded, about knowing, I guess, who my friends and allies are, and that we are well and that we see each other, and following through open processes, hopefully being in situations where I feel there's a lot of nurturing happening and openness and collaboration. I understand that I'm part of a community that's dispersed creatively, geographically, and I always try to understand where my place is around that, or who I'm sidled up close to, but understand that it's a fluctuating and expanding kind of community and base that I need to feel held by. I just feel that there's some intention to my practice as well. and to allow myself the opportunity to learn and to not feel that the learning ends at some point. You know, this is an ongoing activity. And so that's what's important to me, to be open to.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
It kind of feels, you know, sometimes it's hard to describe, but, you know, there are certain things that I feel that you need to kind of ground and guide yourself by. There's always going to be plenty of distractions to kind of like knock you off what might seem to be a pathway. Doesn't necessarily need to be, it could be a wandering. But yeah, I think these things you need to keep close to you.
No, definitely.
Ooh, now we're in space together.
Yes.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Sym. I am B.O.O.K's artist liaison, occasional facilitator, and in this occasion, the podcast producer. I am partner to Mel. Hi, Mel. And also co-parent to their little one, Eol. I am a movement artist, facilitator, occasional community worker, very often daydreamer. My mind is wandering more and more nowadays.
Daydreaming is important.
Yeah, it's very important. I've always been quite like the daydreamer. It's always the comment that teachers have had, but it allows me to build the worlds before I see it physically. So that's nice. And yeah, placement. So I'm an Aries sun, Pisces moon, Sagittarius rising. So double. Yeah, but there is also lots of water in my chart, so I'm very going with the vibes. I am like,
this is the stuff I need to find out about.
Yes, honestly, find the time you were born, and the everything just like unlocks. So
Right.
I'm like a very ungrounded individual, but now I learn to take pride in that and know that I have to take extra steps into grounding myself. And
What do you care about?
yeah, I care about, we've been talking a lot recently about micro moments. And as you were giving your introduction, I thought about sort of the sun peeking through branches and like finding itself on walls. So like those little slits of sunshine that we sometimes miss. Yeah, I'm keeping it short and sweet. That's what I care about today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mel.
Hey.
Mal. So, yeah, my full name is Melissandre, but I prefer to be called Mel. It's more intimate, less intimidating rather. So yeah, I'm B.O.O.K artist curator. I feel like an artist today because I'm just like so much into my body, and like I feel like not in the body but like at the pores of my skin. That's my location of knowledge today. Who I am? I am co-parent to wonderful Eol, partner, lover, and cheerleader of Sym.
Hey.
Who am I? I don't know. I'm someone that is bleeding today, bleeding with joy. Yes. So I'm gonna move to what I care about today. I care about bleeding in peace. I care, like I can imagine myself being in a pool of blood, macerating in my blood, and like getting all the knowledge I have to get from this bleeding experience, and being like alone in that process. That's what I care about right now.
Yes.
And I care about more general terms. I care about growers, growing conditions, and growing possibilities. Yeah, that's what I care about. And feeling, like all the process that is like tying everything together is feeling. I'm a new feeler.
New to feeling.
New to feeling. I've always felt, but I didn't know I was feeling. So lots of processing around that. And now that I can feel, but I feel. So that, and hence the full of blood. Yes. Full of blood.
I love it. Anyway. Very visceral.
And my 3 placements is actually very soft. Anyway, my 3 placements, Pisces, Sun, and double Libra. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, so we can get right into it. Would you want to share your extract first, Adelaide, or would you like one of us to go first?
One of you can go first.
I'm nominating now.
So I was thinking, for the podcast, I've been using books that we held, part of our B.O.O.K library. And there is this one, this is so cute. It's called, it's not that cute, but cute to me. It's called Consent Not to Be a Single Being, Black and Blur by Fred Moten.
Yes.
You really so I'm reading it so slowly. I'm like tasting it. It's like a treat every time.
Yeah, you do have to savor it. It's not, I mean, it's poetry. Well, it's not a quick read.
Yeah, no, it is not. And I feel that every time I turn, my body turns to it, or I'm being called by the book, it's for specific time, like a passage that I need to ingest and digest over a month.
Yes.
So I would like to share today a passage that I highlighted previously. I think, it's the end of the preface. So it goes by. I wasn't expecting to go first, so it's gonna be cool. The music is a riotous solemnity. Oh damn! The music is a riotous solemnity, a terrible beauty. I need to repeat again. The music is a riotous solemnity, a terrible beauty. It hurts so much, but we have to celebrate. But we have to celebrate is what hurts so much. Exhaustive celebration of and in and through our suffering, which is neither distant nor sutured, is Black study. But continually we wound and remade claim upon our monstrosity, our miracle, our showing, which is neither near nor far, as Spiller's shows, is Black feminism. The material ecology of Black and thoughtful stolen life as it steals away. That unending remediation in passage as consent, in which the estrangement of natality is maternal operation in exhabitation, of diffusion and entanglement, marking the displacement of being and singularity, is Blackness. In these essays, I am trying to think that and say that in as many ways as possible. I'm gonna go again. It's like it's challenging for me to pronounce those words with my accents and my brains. So I think there is a music to it. I've never heard myself reading this out loud, and there is a music to me reading it out loud that is funny to me, that is like fleshy. So I want to go again. The music is riotous solemnity, a terrible beauty. It hurts so much that we have to celebrate. But we have to celebrate is what hurts so much. Exhaustive celebration of and in and through our suffering, which is neither distant nor sutured, is Black study. That continually we wound and we made claim upon our monstrosity, our miracle, our showing, which is neither near nor far, as Spiller's shows, is Black feminism. the animaterial ecology of Black and thoughtful stolen life as it steals away, but unending remediation in passage as consent, in which the estrangement of natality is maternal operation in exhabitation, of diffusion and entanglement marking the displacement of being and singularity is Blackness. In these essays, I am trying to think that and say that in as many ways as possible.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's definitely the it hurts so much that we have to celebrate, is what hurts so much. And then that exhaustive celebration through the suffering. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think it kind of chimes well, I think with two of the extracts that I have share with you. I mean, there are 4 texts that are kind of relevant to how I'm feeling at the moment and where I am at the moment. Perhaps if I give you a little background, which I think some of it links to some of the estrangement that Moten talks about in the text. So I'm just settling in a new home. It's been, like for everybody else, it's been quite tumultuous the last few years with the pandemic and with personal, I think, changes. But in the last 5-6 months, I've moved into a new place with my daughters. Whilst we're trying to settle, a lot of our stuff is still in storage, particularly my books as well. And I've gone through this exercise of kind of accumulating a few, but not everything is here. And at some point I need to be able to make space to recall those books that are companions to me, actually. A lot of different types of books, some novels, but I guess, different kinds of writing, particularly around Black visual practice, curating as such. A few things you talked in that extract with Moten, you talked about stolen life and whether near or far, which kind of ran close to me. I have an extract from Saidiya Hartman called Lose Your Mother. And the book is about her travel within Ghana, and I think, which is where my family are from. And recently, I think in the last 2 years, been kind of thinking, I mean, the extract that I'll read is talking about the Elmina Castle, where they held captives before trading them, which I've been to, I've visited as well. But also understanding that an ancestor of mine had some dealing in the slave trade internally in Ghana, not the Atlantic one, but just kind of coming to terms with how to approach looking into that and understanding what that moment was about, particularly as he was a Black man as well. I mean, we know of slave trade, internal slave trading, and I guess I want to understand or learn more about what that means, because obviously that brings me much closer to understanding what my own connection is to the Atlantic slave trade or to the slave trade in general. if you can call it in general. I think maybe I may have been unaware or probably in denial that there was any kind of direct link. But this is something that I want to embark on researching, and then possibly kind of writing about or thinking about in a curatorial kind of context as to how to have that discussion, as to how to look at how implicit we are in these kind of conversations or networks, how kind of easy it is to kind of displace yourself and think that it has nothing to do with me. Also, I'm writing, about to embark on some writing for artist Enam Gabiwonyo, who made some performances earlier on this year about the ship Zong, where they offloaded individuals and just offloaded them into the sea and claimed the insurance on their bodies. But anyway, if I just read this extract, just to give you a sense of what is in my mind at this moment. So, on the day before I left for Elmina, which is about 100 miles west of Accra, on the curved shoreline that forms the Gulf of Guinea, I suffered my first migraine. All the terrible details of the slave trade thundered in my head, and I spent the day battling nausea. I drank ginger ale, pressed a cold compress against my forehead, shut all the blinds, and hid from the world in my dark bedroom. Nothing helped. I wasn't able to dislodge the atrocities committed in wars of capture and slave raids, the elderly and infirm slaughtered by the conquering army, infants murdered by bashing their heads against trees, pregnant women disemboweled with a lance, girls raped, and young men buried in anthills and thrown onto pyres and burned alive. Nor could I clear my head of what one historian had described as the trail of bleached bones that led from the hinterlands to the sea, or forget the disobedient wives who were sold under the pretext of witchcraft, the quarrelsome young men who were sentenced to slavery for being troublemakers, and the ever-growing list of petty infractions punishable by slavery that cost many commoners their lives. Despite situations and bad luck exacted their toll as well. Famished children were sold by their parents so they might live. The indigents offered themselves as slaves to escape poverty and hunger. Nieces and nephews were corralled in barracoons and packed in slavers because of their uncle's unpaid debts. Varied circumstances funneled persons into the market and transformed them into commodities. Yet the outcome of theft and exchange was identical. The slave was born. For every slave who had arrived in the Americas, at least one and perhaps as many as 5 persons died in wars of capture, on the trek to the coast, imprisoned in barracoons, lingering in the belly of a ship, or crossing the Atlantic. Death also awaited them in pest houses, cane fields, and the quarters. Historians still debate whether 12 million or 60 million had been sentenced to death to meet the demands of the transatlantic commerce in Black bodies. So yeah, I think that extract kind of gives you some complexity around the trade of people, whether internally in Africa or to be shipped out of the continent. And I guess that's the complexity in my mind that I feel I need to entangle at the moment, and hope to do in this piece of text first, but also to do the research. I understand he is definitely an ancestor, but I don't know if I have a direct connection to him. So this is what I'm embarking on at the moment.
Wow. And just like on a comment on the extract, I feel like Saidiya Hartman does such a good job of slowing down these things that feel like bricks, like slavery and like these bulk things that we don't really get time to pick apart and look at the complexity, like you say, and like the nuance of literally the everyday moments that were happening. And yeah, she tells it so well, and so I guess the word viscerally again, because it really pulls something out of me.
Yeah, because because I think where she starts with this idea of the migraine, it's about how that information sits with you, what it does to you. And I think that was fairly poignant to me as to how much of an impact the past can have on you and how much it is still very much part of your present. These aren't just things that happen in the past. We are living our past, our future, our present, all at the same time. It's about our understanding of time and how these things can still hurt, and how some of these experiences are still lived ancestrally. And I guess what you decide to, I don't know if taking responsibility for it is the right way to describe it, but I want to unpack that. It for me on a personal level, I need to. Knowing that is not something to be swept under the carpet. It needs unpacking, and so this is quite important for me to start to find a pathway to do that.
I wanted to respond to this call to being attentive to one's body, to understand or to be part of time. I think it made me think of the fact I have had a couple of flare-ups, not that you are like my doctor or anything, but like I've had a couple of flare-ups, especially this year's, of joint flare-ups, and I feel like I'm very much attempting to understand where those flare-ups are attempting to take me to, because the roots of going to treat them in a medical Western sense didn't solve anything, because it very much appears as like signs, as signs of something that is not necessarily in the material world, as I'm trying to misunderstand, or like trying to disintegrate in my brain and body. So yeah, being attentive, this call to being attentive to one's body, what it has to tell, what kind of messages are we being, is the body channeling through, and to what end? That made me, I don't know if it's an intimate question, and if so, if it's something you're feeling uncomfortable with, you feel free to like jump out. I don't necessarily understand what's intimate on that. But I wanted to ask you, in the context of your ancestor, the ancestor that you were talking about, did it come to you in an embodied way, in a verbal way, or was it through research that you?
Well, what it was very interesting how it popped up. So there's, it's probably going to be a bit long-winded, but there's a tour. When I go to Lisbon, for example, there's a tour that I like to do called the African Lisbon Tour, which tells you about the history of the Black community in Portugal, okay, and specific characters that may have been in society around, this is like from about the 15th century onwards. And the guy Nyake, he runs a site on Instagram, and his site is more expansive. He's a historian. He's a social historian, not necessarily trained, but that doesn't matter about him being academically trained. Is his interest that I think is really important. And I think some of the conversations and interactions that happen. And then one day there was a drawing of a guy called James Bannerman. And he was the first kind of native governor of Gold Coast, as Ghana was called then. And he was mixed. His mother was Ghanaian and his father was Scottish. And that's where my family are. Okay, this is where Elmina and Cape Coast is where my family are held, as well as in Accra. And it gave a description about him and his background, but it also then mentioned that he was active in the trade of slaves. And so I was like, wow, it's just like, it's just like, as soon as I saw that, I took screenshots and I shared that around my family, more so my cousins rather than, the older ones are a bit difficult to hold on to, but my family. And one of my cousins said that he knew. And I goes, well, how long did you know? And why wasn't this shared? Just wasn't. But he had an understanding of it, but it wasn't shared. And then it's just that, okay, that's something that I need to look into at some point. But, so it's been floating around in my head. And there was another possibility there was a project around empire that I was thinking it might be good to activate some kind of understanding around that. That didn't happen. So it's just been left with me. And then it came up again quite recently through a friend of mine who works with a photographic collection, and she's a photography scholar, basically. And she came across this picture, and then she asked me, "Is this a relation?" And I goes, "Yeah, quite likely it is. I just don't know if I'm directly descended to him, or if whether he might have been a brother, because what I understand it's still a family relation. I just don't know if he's in my direct line." And then she sent me some other texts, some other kind of research texts that talked about the trading in areas where that was surrounding him, like the markets, actually, and what else was being sold aside from humans, what the everyday kind of movement was around these trading spots, and who was active and who was not. So this is where, as a local businessman, and I guess a member of the middle class, this is where he might have been active. So suddenly, my head thinks like, how does, I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around is understanding how this was open to everybody, in the sense that, was it reasonable? Do you see what I mean? If we know about white traders going there and doing that internally, of course there was always internal politics, and there were tribal politics, and people, if you were captured, you could have been sold to somebody, all these things have been happening from time immemorial, tribal kind of conquest and doing stuff. And then obviously then you have the foreigners coming in as well. But understanding that, you know, that's a part of my legacy as well, you know. It's not something you can just kind of get rid of or ignore. You know, I feel it's important to understand, and not to make it reasonable, no way, but to understand how we're all caught up in these webs of conflict and harm. And so this is so I mean, I've read some of the text, but there's more to follow through. And obviously I want to know how active were kind of native traders actually. You know, what was, I mean, you kind of, you know, you can go to films and you can kind of see, oh yeah, I captured my enemy, I will sell him off, that kind of thing. But going back to that text that Sadia wrote, you know, people were placed into the trading system for all sorts of reasons, and really dumb ones. You know, okay, you spoke back to me, somebody has the power to just trade you off. You know, it's unimaginable, but there it is, you know. And you know, and then also, you know, that thing about, there's a line where she's talking about women who are accused of being witches. You know, this is, and then being sold off, you know, again, you know, this has always been, or this has become an act of capitalism, actually, the way that women have been kind of witch hunted, you know, for somebody's capital gain, or to remove a certain person to create the pathway to somebody else's gain. So, you know, there's all these kind of entanglements that that kind of interest me. I mean, Silvia Federici writes quite deeply about, you know, the witchcraft trials, and she's also looked at how women have been scapegoated in Africa, you know, particularly older African women, by younger members of a village or something like that, to be able to get rid of them, because it means that they have access to that woman, to a widow's property or something like that, or children, you know, particularly girl children, scapegoated. So it's all these entanglements that I feel are just kind of there. You know, there are these ghosts of texts that I've read that are just kind of like talking to kind of like one another as well. So that becomes a bodily thing. You absorb that. Yeah. And every now and again, you are reminded that these behaviors are still here. You know, this slavery still exists. You know, it may just look different, you know, but it exists. So how do you shine a light on that, and you know, and show that you are a part of that ecology, actually, you know, in the same way that we're all contributing to, you know, climate disaster and all this kind of stuff. We're not far from that. We're all implicit. So that's probably gone off. I've probably gone off on a tangent, but
we love a tangent. I think there's so many things to draw out of that, or to just sit with. And I don't know, I'll name a few from my perspective, but one, I suppose, like the insidiousness of capitalism, and all of the little nooks and crannies and shadows and corners that it encompasses and takes. And also what happens when we sit with something. It's like an inner reckoning. And I don't know, like a part of my artistic research this year was around like pain, but also about like suffering through penance, and what it means for a lot of people when we feel like, or some people feel like they deserve to suffer for something. But it's like, how do we sit with that? You know, how do we sit with these truths and these like observations, maybe without going through that route of then recreating harm and suffering. So many things. Did you have anything to add?
I have like months to digest. The offering that you shared with us, Adelaide, like, I just want to thank you. Processing. And I was thinking that since would you like to read a passage, and then maybe Adelaide, if you wanted to read another passage after that?
Yeah.
Because you're going to introduce your book. Apologies, I don't want to do it.
Okay. Could you stabilize this tablet in a way that okay. So gosh, I feel like there's so much to sort of chew over, and it's really going to sit with me for a while. And I also think it's interesting from one perspective of Saidiya Hartman's text and these revelations that you've had, going into a different direction of my extract I chose from Maroon Choreography by Fahima Ife, and talking about the Maroons and those that left and sort of created this alternative life, but this sort of a level of fugitivity, and just thinking of like the nuance and the complexity and this individualness of like, this is not monolithic in any way, like this brick needs to be smashed and broken apart, and we need to like observe these specks of dust, because there's so many different stories that come out of this and so many different legacies that sit in people's bodies. This poem is called, or this text is called, Thirst is a Way of Knowing, Not Knowing. And each like word or phrase is sort of within a bracket, or a type of bracket that I don't know the name of, like a squiggly bracket. So it goes, what I knew was pointless. There on the river of some edge, whose name I cannot speak, was the alchemy of our existence. Inside our body, a hollowness, an aloofness, so devout, I began to call it holy. How I glistened for no one other than myself. How I became an outpouring for everyone. A cool drink of sorrow, laced with gold.
Can you read that one more time, please?
I definitely can. So yes, it's called Thirst is a Way of Knowing, Not Knowing. What I knew was pointless. There on the river of some edge, whose name I cannot speak, was the alchemy of our existence. Inside our body, a hollowness, an aloofness, so devout, I began to call it holy. How I glistened for no one other than myself. How I became an outpouring for everyone. A cool drink of sorrow, laced with gold. I think what like sits with me the most is this like hollowness and aloofness that becomes devout. It becomes holy, like this gaping hole of something that we're trying to pour into, and instead of pouring into, we pour outward. But also many things.
I guess thinking of ourselves as vessels. I guess what also came to mind was this kind of understanding of what the landscape of that interiority is like, and in connection to what was kind of being seen in front of that person's eyes. I'd like to read that sometime. There was another like I said earlier, there are some books that I see as companions, as kind of lifetime, staples that I will go back to over and over again. And there is a book. The book is called The Company She Keeps. And it's full of different essays where the author is having different conversations with other practitioners about the nature of friendship and what that is. What does that look like politically in terms of making work, in terms of being with one another, in terms of thinking of allyships? And I recall one of the essays, I think it was by Avery Thompson or Johnson, I might have got that wrong, but she was actually talking about maroon communities as well, and politically taking yourself away and creating other kind of relationships in order to survive. That came up quite a lot, I think, in what she was writing. But the book is not it's not by a Black author. But going back to, again, this idea of listening inwardly and what's going out, the next text that I selected is by a practitioner called Ione, who's African-American. But they were the lifetime companion of Pauline Oliveros, who's a composer and a researcher around deep listening. And Ione contributed to many kind of performances and to writing collaboratively with Pauline. Listening for me is very important. It's a skill that we all need to get better at, but also because of the different kinds of music that I like to listen to or find challenging, that I find exciting. So this is why I also bring her in, because I think that skill of listening is also a skill about kind of understanding who your what communities you are part of. What does the landscape sound like? So this extracts that I'm reading from Quantum Listening. And it's a few small kind of short essays, but the extract that I'll read from is from her introduction, which is called As I Write, I Listen. And she talks about her partner in this as well. So, as you listen, the particles of sound decide to be heard. Listening affects what is sounding. It is a symbiotic relationship. As you listen, the environment is enlivened. This is the listening effect. As I write, I listen. The words forming in my mind are sounds. Listening forward in time, I sense and feel you, the reader, listening as well. By listening in this manner, I'm experiencing the listening effect, which not only transports me, but simultaneously centers me in the present moment. My listening continues to deepen and expand as I practice Pauline Oliveros' lifelong passion, deep listening. Quantum theory is such an integral part of Pauline's teachings that she might well have used this title to encompass the bulk of her teachings, but the term deep listening took root not long after the moment in 1988, when Pauline and can't say that, descended into the Dan Harpo system, a long, empty receptacle for water 14 feet underground. In the cavernous depths, they listened intently as their sounds returned to them with an extraordinary delay of 45 seconds. As an afterthought, they brought along recording equipment, resulting in the 1989 album Deep Listening. Both Pauline and Stuart were notorious punsters, and titling the album Deep Listening made them smile and laugh out loud. The next extract is when okay, maybe, I think I've lost it. Oh yeah, here it is, sorry. Okay, another extract. I'm listening from 2,000 miles away. In February 2022, the durational show Lives opened at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles. The original plan was for me to be present and perform live at the opening, but a renewed viral scare meant that instead I performed from my office in Hudson Valley, New York. I was visible and audible on a giant wall screen at the request of the curator. The track, Ione, which is her name, on the Deep Listening album played to the group of people gathered in a large, comfortable room with soft wall-to-wall carpeting. I invited them to relax and to recline if they were so disposed while they listened. This deep listening exercise was a prelude, a tune-up for us, before I invited all to participate in Pauline's tune-in meditation with their own voices. I have facilitated the tune-in meditation many times in various versions, live with a live audience, streamed with an audience as virtual as me. This time I was struck by how moved I was by the sensation of being with them and with Pauline's music in this ever so slightly different form of virtual communication. My performance comprised listening to their listening as well as to my own. Something special, something bold, old and new had occurred, something healing. The mystery of a non-local quantum moment out of time, demonstrating Pauline's message that practice listening continues to evolve, consistently yielding new information. Perhaps that might have been the extract I should have started with, but I think it kind of gives a sense of the moments that we need more of, you know, and what occurs in those moments, how we are moved by them and what action we can take from them, potentially. And that's kind of how I feel, I think, with, you know, I feel that's what, you know, what can be improvised from those moments, I think is what we kind of need to somehow act on or keep developing in our minds. And I think that's what excites me, you know, when more attention is paid to that.
Yeah, the constant yielding. I see lots of I feel through that constant yielding. Oh, and I think it's for me it communicates with all three of the passages that you chose to share with us. So I'm so happy that you finished with that one, actually, because it like it provided a way of integration for me, of integration of the ideas.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking of this idea of symbiosis between, I suppose, the listener and the listenee, but then knowing that the listenee or the person on the thing on the other end isn't necessarily going to respond in the ways that you, like you say, when it comes to improvising, this level of improvisation and letting go of like rigidity when it comes to understanding and comprehension of the other, you know, and there can be no level of rigidity when it comes to comprehension because we don't understand the complexities of the other. And we never can, I suppose, unless we listen. Yeah, lots of thought words. I was thinking as well, if you have a fourth extract, if you wanted to share it at the end, and maybe you can like finish it off if you did have a fourth. But it's up to you.
I don't. I don't. I mean, I think, there, again, because of the slight scarcity of what I have at home, I did choose 4 texts, but the other 2, relate, but I guess, but they relate more to me as a subject, and that's the Black subject, if you like, but they're not necessarily, and again, it's about thinking about landscape, where we want to situate ourselves, what we need to, how we listen to what that landscape is. And then the other one is more connected to, again, to space as well, and is one of these enduring texts, but both by white authors.
Okay, but it's funny that you talk about scarcity, because I feel like you've provided such an abundance.
Literally what I was thinking. Yeah. And it's really interesting to see also like what is scarcity for you is abundance for us, and like how everything is rational, proportional.
Yeah.
Sorry. And also I was thinking, what was I thinking? I think that your readings and your presence with us really reminded me that this is an experiment, like this life or those lives that are happening at the simultaneously are an experiment, because often I think that when like maybe a more mainstream understanding of what an experiment is seems to be associated with something negative, manipulation going on. But I'm literally like being manipulated by the waves of the internet, but also the particles of sound. I think they were talking about particles of sounds happening at the same time. Not everything needs to be seen in a binary kind of way. And also, I feel very elevated from the readings that you shared with us. I'm like, I'm high.
Well, that makes me happy. I think, I guess scarcity, is because I love my books. And I believe that once I get back, and if you still have your library, there may be some that I'd like to contribute to your library as well, because I won't be able to have them all, but certainly I miss my companions. So I guess that's what I mean in terms of what friends have I got around me, in terms of numbers. But it shouldn't be just about the numbers, it's about who's there. And Sadia and Ione were there, so that's what I had to share.
So beautiful. I would like to know more about you by the way of the 3 questions. So the first one is, who was waiting for you to be born?
I think my grandmother. She died in 2008, but and I can't say that I was physically close to her, because my grandmother was Ghanaian. She was widowed quite young with 2 children, which was my father and his brother. They're all deceased. But she was a textile trader, or she became one, and was traveling a lot between Ghana and Nigeria for her business. And then eventually she settled in Lagos and married her second husband. And she started a second family, which were all women, but she lost a child. And I think that still left a gap with her. The loss of a child was still something that she felt greatly. And for some reason, it's not like my father didn't have any previous relationships before my mother, which had produced kids who were around her. But for some reason, she was focused on me, and I was given her name. and she used to write to me before I could even read, but she seemed to have a sense of me, which is quite strange when I read it back, because it's a part of me that she recognized, you know, as a very young child. But in a sense, it was me that she was kind of waiting for. So yeah, so that brings me to her, and again brings me to trying to understand what her life was about, as well, you know, as a woman, working, leaving her children behind with her mother to ensure that they had all the things that they needed, and just being away from them. And yeah, she was very independent. You know, I know a bit more about her in her absence than I did in her life. So that's who I feel was waiting for me.
I feel close to your grandmother now as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I think the way that I think the kind of reasoning that I've developed since actually losing my father and uncle, I think 2014 and 16 respectively, is that, okay, the physical body goes, but there is still a relationship, and there is still a conversation to be had. And so I understand that I still commune with them, or that there are messages, subtle messages that come through in daily life, you know, certain things you think, oh, you know, why am I suddenly getting a tasting for this? Or, oh, I've seen something shiny. That's exactly what Dad would like. Maybe he's prodding somewhere, you know, it's things like that. So that keeps me buoyant. That's my understanding of how we keep close to our ancestors, you know, and how we still commune with them, how we still have them in our lives.
Yeah, I like this, what you said about sort of learning just as much or more like in the absence than in the presence, and how different that can be than the physical presence. Yeah, and how it can be different because it's now passing through you, like you say, through the taste buds, through different things and these little quirks that they might have that you may not have been aware of before, that continue to live on through your own senses. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, let's listen more of you with the second question. That is, who is holding you tight for you to grow?
Yeah. I think that's spread across actual bodies and bodies of thought. Yeah. You know, there's whether we see it as mentoring or not, I think there are different things that people around me, whether I see them on a daily basis or not, or even through sessions like this, you know, things like this make me feel held, you know, make me feel a part of the world, you know. I think it's quite easy, you know, with the kind of lives that we have, to feel estranged from what's around us or from what we're doing on a daily basis, because there's a certain pattern to the way that we need to engage in the world. And I think there's very few moments or opportunities to kind of challenge that and to still come out in one piece, you know, how to be defiant about your own care or about others' care, and to keep that at the forefront of everything that you're doing. I mean, I feel lucky that there are people around me who think similarly in that way or respect that. Sometimes, I don't always see them on a daily basis, but sometimes some kind of exchange reminds me that they are there and that I am part of them. Particularly this kind of year that I've had, for some reasons or another, I have felt a little bit more reclusive. I have gone more inward, but they're still there. They still knock on my door, metaphorically, or just like, they still say, all right, we're still, so, and then, messages that you get through something that you read outside in the fabric of the city or right in front of you, or a text or something, those things kind of keep me held. Yeah.
Oh, nice. I don't know, I was thinking about since the beginning of our conversation, thinking about these sparks that happen when we pass by someone else or have brief communion with someone else, but that bright spark that really pushes you or really sparks something in you that you hold on to, even if and it sort of goes what you were saying as well about how to be in communion with others, friendships, allies, those that we hold close, whether it be through messages, through texts, through human beings. How do we still evolve and be in communion and understand each other's evolution and listen, comprehending each other's evolution to still know how to hold each other? It's really a beautiful thing.
How do we nourish each other on a cellular level, diving deep into it.
Many thoughts.
Many thoughts. And I really echo you when you say that this moment, or even if we have to stay on time, trying to track time, it feels like it's going to nourish us for a long ride. And those moments, I'm manifesting that I want more of those moments in my life. And I also really appreciate what you consider as companion or not, and how for extrapolating to with my experience, but how sometimes there is a need for a cut, a clear cut, when you've observed and you've tried ways to nourish the relationship, but it's not nourishing nobody in an organic way. So how to be with.
I mean, it's also, I'm sitting here and I have this baby right here. Okay, I have a number of plants that I've kept going for a number of years, and I've grown in confidence with them. It's about what they've kind of shared with me as well, and who greet me when I come home, So understanding how friendship and being held, how that changes from one context to the next. I mean, how you feel in those moments, it shifts. It's a shapeshifter kind of feeling, where you seek comfort, who you seek comfort from, or who you can speak to in a moment where you're feeling all sorts of things. How do you identify, who to go to? It's those kinds of things. That's what's been kind of in my mind as well.
I was thinking of on the back of what you were just saying. It's also for me what and how, how and who holds you to find comfort in a very uncomfortable worlds, very uncomfortable worlds happening at the same time. And so I was trying to make a transition to the last question, but is how do we create a loving environment a loving environment in the art too? How do we create a loving environment in the art too?
Mm.
In the art world. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's very challenging. But again, it's about who you perceive is there for you. And how you see each other, how you connect, how you observe, whether you're in close proximity or afar. You need to feel that wherever you go, this kind of network or this feeling held kind of needs to be with you. How do you conjure that up in those moments where you don't physically feel those things? How do you remind yourself about why I'm doing this or why I'm working in this particular field? Because there are so many distractions, so many people are going to tell you what you're doing is this or that. There's so many ways in which people want to use the visual arts, but you have to kind of ask yourself, well, what am I doing this for? And who is it for? It doesn't have to be strategic with a full plan, legacy plan or anything. But I guess sometimes what I feel I have to dodge is the way that you sometimes become instrumental to other people's plans and they're not necessarily conducive to yours, and how to avoid that, how to not play into those kinds of behaviors or systems, because sometimes it's so bold, you can see what's happening and it's just like, do I really want to be part of that? What do I get out of that spiritually? Okay, maybe I might get money for it, but it might pay a bill, but in the long term, how does it feel to me? So I think what has kind of worked for me is that, okay, I've been doing this for quite a long time now, but essentially I still need to, I take up periphery actually, because I feel I need to see what's happening in the so-called center. I think there's more from what I can see on the outside, kind of like looking in and then kind of choosing which way to navigate. I think there are things that you need to weigh up. There's a certain kind of interaction you can have within that world that might not match somebody else's idea of what ambition is, and whether it gets you there. But what you've got to retain is your sense of self, and what you need. I feel for artists' work. Visual art teaches me a lot. That's my first place in terms of how to think about the world and what's happening, what's changing, how are people's lives changing, what are they representing within their work, what does it tell us? It's a very rich kind of, it provides a very rich understanding of what's going on. But obviously, once it enters all these different galleries, there are certain positions that like to be kind of siphoned off, are selected to present. And that goes already through a selection process, right? So understanding where you get nourishment from, what kind of situations, what kind of art worlds do you want to be part of? Because there are many. There isn't just one. There are many. And what kind of art world can you create or be part of for yourself and for those around you? I think this is what needs to be understood, or that people need to pay attention to. I think it's only because of the time that I've had working that I've developed, for example, a lot of contacts, a lot of them quite senior in these institutions, that I can know them. So I think to some people it might be seen as, oh, she's an insider, knows all the kind of stuff. But it's not actually the case. You know, it's all been through different encounters. I don't necessarily go to all the things that I should be at to be seen, to be an influencer, to be influential, you know, all that kind of. I'm very happy to just come home and do the ironing or something like that, rather than, you know, it would, you know, if I'm going to do any of those kind of things, it has to feel that there's something nourishing there for me to take away. So this is what you've always got to think about. How is this going to feed me? Yeah.
I love that last question. Because literally and metaphorically, like, this is the question: how is this going to feed me, you know? Not only like on the financial element, but spiritual, intellectual, arts, you know. How is it going to feed me on the long run?
Yeah, it literally took me back to when you're talking about deep listening, quantum listening, like the only way, and it's not necessarily like we always have to create the loving environment, but sometimes we have to just create it for ourselves, and knowing which environments are actually safe for us energetically, spiritually, physically, mentally, to enter, and to like, to understand that we have to listen. One, have to listen to how our body and mind responds to the spaces and people, but also responding to like, yeah, like you say, like, is this nourishing me? Am I learning from this? Like, is this bringing me to a place where I know is like a part of my journey? Like starting with the inward first.
For sure. Definitely. That's what you've got. That's what each of us has. And we can deconstruct it, you know, what makes us feel uncomfortable about this space or these people or this or that. You know, we can take it on a case-by-case basis, and you develop the knowledge of, you know, do I want to be there or not? You know, and, you know, it's informed, right? Yeah,
love it. So I'm taking away the paying attention to our interior landscapes, and from that, checking whether we can create landscapes in the arts, because the case study, landscapes in the arts that can reflect deep interiority or interiorities.
Yeah, that better fit us, you know, because there are many institutions, right? And I think particularly, and this has been my thought, particularly over the pandemic, that, you know, the pandemic kind of showed them up for how they're not holding us up, you know, and or how they might not be fit for purpose. So why are we trying to fit into those spaces? Maybe it needs other models, other ways of being in these art worlds. That's, you know, it could be about creating new institutions, or it could be creating very short-term, but kind of really nourishing, really dense kind of interactions. You know, it doesn't always have to be about having a building. You need to think about how you bring people together, if whether that is going to be virtual or elsewhere, but how do we think around that so that it's not about us trying to feel, I need to go there, I need to be in that space, you know, why? You know?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, I feel like this conversation is like a piece of gum that I chew on, and then I stick to the side and I bring it back. I do that too. It is very visceral, and I do not do that. But for this conversation, yes, I will. Yeah, what an honor it's been to like have this conversation and to just be enriched by this. So thank you so much.
Very pleasurable.
No, thank you both, because I just feel, you know, sometimes you need to say these things out loud, you know, and to share it with two wonderful beings as well.
Louder, the wonderful beings.
Yeah, it's been really nice, you know, to just kind of catch up. I know a lot has happened, and you know, but to have this meeting point has been really valuable.
Okay, I go back online. Let's do this. Shit. Fuck the skin scene, I live in HTTP. Fuck a VIP, I'll just watch a POV. Fuck the police, only bots follow me. CC trace everything I ever see. Fuck the skin scene, I live in HTTP. Fuck a VIP, I'll just watch a POV. Fuck the police, only bots follow me. CC trace everything I ever see. Let me decentralize your wealth, drop the rocks, mate. That jewelry's for the streets, call it blockchain. You can't hide in a machine, you are not safe. I'll stick you up for your attention, your memory retention. I'll make you hate your friends so you don't see your own potential. I'll overdose and dope your fucking dopamine receptors. I'll sell your votes to admin, politicians and investors. Yeah, check my credentials. I can carbon copy anything that you could want. Show you that reality is anything you want. Just don't leave me alone. Please don't go. All of your friends are here. All of your colleagues are here. All of your opportunities are here. Everything you love is right here. Only thing on the chain is the link. A rose stinks with the same or distinct. Up, down, it'll change if you blink. And it's all kitsch till they're claiming the sink. Volatile moonshot. If it's cold hard cash, who's hot? Oh my bag, who's got it slow? Lag, no problem if you got the computation, huh? Hierarchy replication, huh? Every night inside the metaverse, and we're still working like it was a day job, huh? Build motorways on our synapses as though traffic goes driverless. Suffer still, suffer psychic damage because isolation is a kind to us, huh? Oxygen, 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 oxygen.